chosen one. Pause for a moment, because something in your spirit was just stirred, and that is not random. This is not just another video crossing your path. This is a divine interruption, a moment heaven designed to reach you at the exact time you were ready to hear it. Anointed one. There has always been something different about you, hasn't there? A weight you couldn't explain, a sensitivity others misunderstood, a quiet knowing, even as a child, that you did not fully belong to the environment around you. While others blended in, you stood apart, and it cost you. The rejection, the confusion, the early battles you faced. They were never ordinary. You were marked before you understood what that meant. The scripture says in Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee." That means your story did not begin in chaos, it began in intention. What looked like isolation was actually separation. What felt like pressure was preparation. Chosen one, if this message is finding you now, it is because the time of understanding has arrived. And if your spirit is already recognizing this truth, stay connected, because there are more messages meant specifically for you. Now listen closely, because what you are about to uncover will change the way you see your entire life. Chosen one. Before we go any further, you need to understand something that may shift the way you see your entire life. You were not misread. You were misdiagnosed. For years, people tried to label you with words that never truly fit. Too sensitive, too intense, too different. And after hearing it long enough, a part of you started to believe it. You began to question yourself. You wondered if maybe something was actually wrong with you. But let me speak clearly into your spirit right now. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is right with you, and it has been right since the very beginning. There is a specific feeling that only a chosen one understands. It's not easy to explain to people who have never carried it. It's that quiet, persistent sense that you don't fully belong, even in places that should feel like home. You could be sitting in your own room surrounded by familiar things and still feel like a stranger. Not in a dramatic way, but in a deep, almost unspoken way, like your soul is remembering something your mind cannot explain. I remember feeling that myself, being in a room full of people, even people I cared about, and still feeling like I was observing life instead of fully participating in it. It wasn't loneliness exactly. It was something deeper, like I was placed there but not from there. Chosen one, that feeling is not confusion. It is recognition. It is the first hidden sign. You are in this world, but you were never designed to be shaped by it. And once you understand that, everything starts to make sense. Now listen closely. The weight you carried as a child, the pressure, the emotional heaviness, the battles you couldn't explain, that was not random. That was not just life being hard. That was not ordinary dysfunction. That was targeted. There is something the world rarely talks about. The moment you carry something from God, even before you understand it, there is already resistance assigned to it. The kingdom of darkness can sense light before the person carrying it even recognizes it themselves. So go back for a moment. Think about your childhood. Were you the one who always felt different? The one who seemed to carry more than your age should allow? The one who was blamed, misunderstood, or quietly isolated? Chosen one, you were not the problem in that environment. You were the disruption. Light always exposes what others are trying to hide, even when it doesn't say a word. And people don't always know how to handle that. That's why you were labeled. That's why you were misunderstood. That's why you were made to feel like you had to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. But here is the truth most people will never tell you. They were not reacting to who you were. They were reacting to what was in you. You carried a sensitivity that wasn't weakness, it was discernment. You noticed things others ignored. You felt things others suppressed. You saw through masks before you even knew what a mask was. Have you ever looked at someone as a child and just knew something wasn't right? Even if you couldn't explain it, that wasn't imagination. That was your spirit reading what your mind hadn't been taught yet. Chosen one, you were picking up on truth before you had language for it. And that made people uncomfortable, because truth, when it stands in the room, doesn't need to speak to be felt. This is why they called you too much. This is why they told you to quiet down. This is why you learned early how to observe instead of express. But what they tried to suppress, heaven was developing. And this leads to the second realization you need to accept: the rejection you experienced was not rejection, it was protection. I know that's hard to hear, especially when the pain was real. You gave loyalty and received distance. You offered love and received misunderstanding. You tried to connect, and instead you felt pushed out. But what if I told you? If those people had fully accepted you, they would have shaped you into something you were never meant to become. Sometimes being excluded is the only way to preserve what is inside you. There were environments you were not allowed to blend into, because blending in would have diluted your identity. Chosen one, you were not being pushed out. You were being set apart. Even the scripture echoes this pattern. Those who carry purpose often walk through seasons of rejection before they walk into recognition. And if you're honest, every place you felt rejected from, you eventually realized. You outgrew it. Now let's go deeper, because one of the most confusing parts of your journey wasn't just external rejection. It was internal warfare. There were moments when your own mind became the battlefield. Thoughts that didn't feel like you, waves of heaviness that came without warning, questions about your worth, your purpose, even your desire to keep going. And maybe you never said it out loud, but you wondered, why do I feel this way, chosen one? Hear me carefully. Not every thought that enters your mind belongs to you. The mind of a chosen person is not just a place of thinking, it is a place of strategy, and anything that carries purpose will face pressure. The confusion you felt was not proof that you were broken. It was evidence that something valuable was being targeted. Because if the enemy can exhaust your mind, he can delay your movement. But even in that, you are still here, still standing, still searching, still listening to something deeper calling your name. And that alone should tell you something. You were never meant to be taken out. You were meant to make it through. Now stay with me, because what you thought was just your personality is actually the beginning of something much more intentional. There is another layer to this that most people never recognize until much later in life, and it explains why your path has felt so different from everyone around you. You were not just marked, you were trained early, often in ways that felt uncomfortable, isolating, and at times even unfair. While others were allowed to move through life casually, you were being shaped in silence. Situations that should have been simple for you carried unusual weight. Relationships required more discernment. Environments drained you faster. You were being stretched before you even understood why. This is where many chosen ones begin to misunderstand their own story. They look at their early life and see struggle, confusion, or even instability, but what they do not see is the hidden design behind it. There was a pressure on you that did not make sense at the time because it was not meant to be understood at that stage. It was meant to develop something inside of you. That constant sense of being watched, judged, or misunderstood was not random. It was part of a pattern that often follows those who carry something significant. Think about how early you became aware of people's energy. You could walk into a room and immediately feel whether something was off. You noticed tension before anyone spoke. You sensed dishonesty even when the words sounded right. This kind of awareness is not something most people develop until much later, if at all. But for you, it was there from the beginning. It shaped how you interacted with the world. It made you cautious in some spaces and deeply observant in others. I remember realizing this in my own life when I started noticing that I could read a situation before it unfolded. I would feel uneasy around certain people without knowing why, and later, everything would reveal itself exactly as I sensed. At first I thought it was overthinking, but over time I understood that it was not anxiety. It was discernment that had been developing quietly over years of experience. Chosen one. What you experienced as discomfort was often your spirit recognizing what your environment could not explain. And because you could not explain it, you questioned it. You learned to doubt your own instincts. You second-guessed what you felt. You tried to rationalize what your spirit already knew. This created an internal conflict that followed you for years because you were taught to trust logic over intuition, even when your intuition kept proving itself right. This is one of the hidden effects of being marked early. You develop awareness before you develop language for it. You sense things before you can define them, and without guidance that can feel confusing, even overwhelming. But once you begin to understand it, it becomes one of your greatest strengths. Now consider how often you found yourself alone, not always physically, but internally. Even when you were surrounded by people, there was a part of you that felt separate. You could engage, you could communicate, you could even connect on a surface level, but something deeper always remained untouched. That distance was not because you were incapable of connection. It was because not every environment could meet you where you were. Isolation in your case was not just absence, it was preparation. There were seasons where you were pulled away from noise, from distractions, from certain relationships, and it felt like loss at the time. But looking back, those were the moments where you began to hear yourself more clearly, where your thoughts became sharper, where your understanding deepened. There is a pattern that shows up repeatedly in lives that carry purpose. Before clarity comes separation. Before direction comes stillness. And before elevation comes a kind of quiet that most people try to avoid. You were introduced to that quiet early. Not because you were being left behind, but because you were being set apart from influences that would have shaped you in the wrong direction. This is also why your tolerance for superficial things has always been low. Conversations that lack depth drain you. Environments that lack authenticity feel heavy. You may not always say it, but you feel it immediately. That internal resistance is not negativity. It is alignment trying to guide you away from what does not match who you are becoming. And then there is your heart. This is another sign that often gets misunderstood. You have a tendency to give more than you receive. You forgive when others would walk away. You try to understand even when you have been hurt. This has led you into situations where people have taken advantage of your kindness. You have been there for people who were not there for you. You have poured into others who had no intention of pouring back. At times, this has made you question your own judgment. You wondered why you kept attracting the same patterns, why you kept encountering people who needed healing but were not ready to grow. But what you need to understand is that your capacity to care is not the problem. It is a reflection of something strong within you. The challenge is not your ability to give. It is learning when to protect what you carry. There comes a point where you realize that not everyone who is drawn to your light is meant to stay in your life. Some are drawn to benefit from it. Others are drawn because it exposes something in them. And a few are drawn because they are meant to walk with you. The difficulty is learning to tell the difference. This is where your earlier experiences begin to make sense. The situations that taught you to observe the moments that forced you to reflect the relationships that showed you what imbalance looks like. All of it was building your ability to recognize patterns, not just in others, but in yourself. And here is something that may shift your perspective even further. The resistance you have faced, especially when you were close to making progress, was not coincidence. You may have noticed that just as things begin to align, something unexpected happens. A distraction appears, a conflict arises, an obstacle slows you down. This pattern can be frustrating because it feels like you are constantly being pulled back just as you are moving forward. But this is where you have to shift how you interpret these moments. Instead of seeing them as signs that you are off track, consider the possibility that they are reactions to the direction you are moving in. When you are moving towards something that matters, resistance increases, not to stop you permanently, but to test your consistency, to see whether you will continue or retreat. And over time, you have proven something important. You keep going. Even when you are tired, even when you are unsure, even when it would be easier to step back. There is something in you that continues to move forward, even if it is slowly. That persistence is not accidental. It is part of what has been developing in you over time. And this is where the shift begins to happen, because once you start to recognize these patterns, you stop seeing your life as a series of disconnected events. You begin to see the continuity, the way one experience prepared you for the next, the way certain lessons repeated until they were understood, the way your awareness has been increasing even when your external situation has not changed immediately. Chosen one. You are not where you were before. Even if your surroundings look similar, you are not the same person navigating them. Your perception has changed. Your sensitivity has become clarity. Your confusion is turning into understanding. And once that shift becomes stable, the way you move forward will not look like how you moved before. What begins to happen next is subtle, but once you recognize it, you cannot unsee it. The same patterns that once confused you start revealing their purpose. The same situations that once drained you begin to expose what they were really doing in your life. You start to realize that nothing was wasted, not the difficult relationships, not the moments of isolation, not even the internal battles you fought in silence. All of it was shaping your ability to see clearly. Chosen. One clarity is one of the most powerful shifts you will experience, because once you see things for what they are, you can no longer return to the version of yourself that tolerated confusion. You begin to notice how certain people operate not just by what they say, but by what they consistently show. You recognize patterns of behavior that once went unnoticed. You pick up on subtle changes in tone, intention, and energy that you used to ignore. There was a time when you gave people the benefit of the doubt repeatedly, even when something felt off. You wanted to believe the best. You tried to maintain peace. You told yourself that maybe you were overthinking, but now something has shifted. You still care, but you also observe. You still listen, but you also discern. You no longer silence your own awareness to keep others comfortable. This is where many chosen ones begin to feel a sense of separation again, but this time it feels different. Before, the distance came from confusion. Now it comes from understanding. You are not withdrawing because you feel lost. You are stepping back because you see clearly, and that clarity changes how you move. You begin to understand that not everyone is meant to go with you into the next phase of your life. This realization can feel uncomfortable, especially if you have always been someone who values connection and loyalty. But loyalty without alignment leads to imbalance, and imbalance eventually leads to exhaustion. You may have already experienced this in small ways. Conversations that once felt normal now feel draining. Interactions that used to be easy now require effort. You notice yourself becoming quieter, not out of insecurity, but because you are no longer willing to engage in things that do not align with who you are becoming. This is not distance for the sake of distance. It is discernment, creating space. And with that space comes something important. You begin to hear yourself more clearly again. Not the version of you that was shaped by expectations or influenced by external noise, but the version that has been developing quietly beneath all of that. The one that has been paying attention, learning, adjusting, and growing. I remember reaching a point where I realized I could no longer participate in conversations that once felt normal. It was not because I thought I was better than anyone. It was because I could feel the difference in what I needed and what I was receiving. That shift was uncomfortable at first because it meant letting go of certain dynamics I had become used to. But once I allowed that space, everything started to realign. Chosen one, you are entering that kind of realignment. This is where the internal shift becomes external. The way you think begins to influence the way you move. The way you move begins to influence the environments you choose. And the environments you choose begin to influence the opportunities that come into your life. You are no longer moving unconsciously. You are becoming intentional. And with intention comes responsibility. You start to recognize that your energy, your time, and your focus are valuable. You become more selective, not out of fear, but out of awareness. You understand that what you allow into your space has a direct impact on how you feel, how you think, and how you act. This is also where boundaries begin to form more naturally. Not forced, not aggressive, but clear. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone. You do not feel obligated to stay in situations that do not feel right. You are learning to trust your judgment without constantly seeking validation. That shift can feel unfamiliar at first, especially if you have spent a long time adjusting yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you. But over time, it becomes your new normal. Now here is something that often happens during this phase that you need to be aware of. As you begin to change, not everyone around you will understand it. Some will notice the difference in you, but will not know how to interpret it. Others may feel uncomfortable because your clarity highlights their lack of it. And a few may even try to pull you back into the version of yourself they are familiar with. This is where you have to remain grounded in what you know. You are not changing to become distant. You are evolving to become aligned. There is a difference, and not everyone is ready to grow at the same pace. That does not make them wrong, but it also does not mean you have to slow yourself down to match where they are. Growth requires movement, and movement sometimes creates distance. You may start to notice that certain connections fade without conflict. There is no major argument, no clear ending, just a gradual shift where communication becomes less frequent and the connection naturally dissolves. This is not something to resist, it is part of the process. At the same time, new interactions may begin to appear. Conversations that feel more balanced. People who understand without you having to explain everything. Environments where you feel more at ease. These changes may be subtle at first, but they are indicators that your alignment is shifting. And as this continues, something else begins to happen internally. Your confidence starts to change, not in a loud or performative way, but in a quiet, steady way. You become less reactive. Situations that would have once unsettled you no longer have the same effect. You find yourself pausing instead of responding immediately. You think more clearly before you act. This kind of confidence is different because it is not based on external validation. It is based on internal understanding. You know what you bring, you know what you see, you know what you feel, and you are no longer willing to ignore it. Chosen one. This is where your earlier experiences begin to make sense in a new way. The sensitivity that once felt like a burden is now your awareness. The isolation that once felt like rejection is now your clarity. The challenges that once felt overwhelming are now your preparation. You are starting to see how everything connects. And once you see that your perspective on your own life changes, you stop asking why certain things happened and you start understanding what they were building in you. You stop viewing your past as something that held you back, and you begin to recognize how it moved you forward in ways you did not see at the time. This shift is not dramatic from the outside, but internally it changes everything. Because once you understand your path, you stop resisting it. And once you stop resisting it, you begin to move with it instead of against it. That is where the next level of your journey begins to unfold. And as you begin to move with your path, instead of resisting it, something deeper starts to surface, something that has been there all along but was buried under layers of confusion, expectation, and survival. It is not loud, and it does not demand attention, but it is steady. It feels like a quiet pull, a sense of direction that does not come from pressure, but from knowing. This is where many chosen ones start to realize that their life is not just unfolding randomly, it is responding to something internal that has finally been acknowledged. You may notice that you are no longer chasing things the way you used to. The urgency to prove yourself begins to fade. The need to be understood by everyone starts to lose its grip. You still care, but you no longer depend on it. There is a shift from seeking validation to maintaining alignment. And that shift changes how you approach everything from your relationships to your decisions. There was a time when you would question every step, wondering if you were doing the right thing, looking for confirmation from others before trusting your own judgment. But now, even if you still have moments of uncertainty, you are not paralyzed by them. You move forward with a level of trust that you did not have before. Not because everything is clear, but because you have learned that clarity often comes through movement, not before it. Chosen one. This is where your awareness becomes authority. Not authority over others, but authority over yourself. You begin to recognize when something is not right without needing external proof. You start to act on what you feel without waiting for permission. This does not mean you become impulsive. It means you become grounded. You are no longer easily influenced by every opinion, every trend, every expectation placed on you. I remember reaching a point where I realized I was no longer reacting the same way I used to. Situations that would have once triggered me became easier to navigate. Not because they disappeared, but because my response changed. That is when I understood that growth is not always about what happens around you. It is about what changes within you. This internal authority also brings a new level of responsibility, because now you can see more clearly you are also accountable for how you respond. You can no longer say you did not know. You can no longer ignore what you feel. You are aware, and awareness requires action. This is where many people hesitate because stepping into alignment often requires letting go of what is familiar. Even if what is familiar is not healthy, it is still known. And the unknown can feel uncertain even when it is necessary. You may feel this in the way your life is shifting. Certain paths that once seemed obvious no longer feel right. Opportunities that you once would have accepted without hesitation now require deeper consideration. You are no longer making decisions based solely on convenience or expectation. You are making them based on alignment. This can feel like a slowdown at times, but it is not stagnation, it is refinement. You are learning to move with intention instead of impulse. You are learning to pause, to observe, to understand before you act. And in that process, you are building something that cannot be easily shaken. There is also a deeper emotional shift that happens here. You begin to make peace with parts of your past that once felt unresolved. Not because everything has been explained, but because you no longer need every answer to move forward. You start to accept that some things were meant to shape you, not to be fully understood. Chosen one. This is where your relationship with your own story begins to change. You stop viewing your experiences as something that happened to you, and you begin to see them as something that worked through you. Every challenge, every delay, every unexpected turn, all of it contributed to who you are now. And when you look at it from that perspective, even the difficult parts carry a different meaning. You begin to recognize that the strength you have now did not come from ease. The clarity you have now did not come from comfort. The awareness you carry now did not come from being shielded. It came from being exposed, from navigating situations that required you to grow often without guidance. That realization changes how you see yourself. You no longer underestimate what you have developed. You begin to respect your own process. You understand that the way you think, the way you observe, the way you respond, all of it has been shaped intentionally. This is also where your sense of direction becomes more stable. You may not have every detail figured out, but you are no longer lost. There is a difference between not knowing everything and not knowing anything. You are not in the same place you were before, and with that stability comes a new kind of patience. You are no longer rushing to reach a destination just to feel secure. You are learning to trust the process as it unfolds. You understand that not everything needs to happen at once. Some things require time, not because they are delayed, but because they are developing. This patience is not passive, it is active awareness. You are present in your own life in a way you were not before. You notice more, you understand more, you respond more intentionally. And as this continues, something else becomes clear. You are no longer trying to become someone else. You are becoming more of who you already are. That distinction matters because it shifts your focus from comparison to alignment. You are not measuring your progress against others. You are not trying to follow someone else's timeline. You are paying attention to your own path. Chosen. 1. This is where your identity becomes more grounded. Not in titles, not in roles, but in understanding. You know what resonates with you and what does not. You know what aligns with your direction and what pulls you away from it. And that knowledge allows you to move with a level of confidence that does not depend on external circumstances. At the same time, this phase can feel quiet from the outside. There may not be dramatic changes that others can see immediately. But internally, everything is shifting. Your perspective, your priorities, your responses, all of it is evolving. And that internal shift will eventually reflect externally, because what changes within you always finds a way to show up in your environment. This is where you begin to notice that opportunities start to align differently. Not necessarily more, but more relevant, more connected to who you are now. Situations that match your level of understanding, interactions that feel more balanced. These changes do not happen all at once, but they begin to appear as you continue to move in alignment with yourself. Chosen one, you are not forcing your way forward anymore. You are positioning yourself, and that difference will shape everything that comes next. Because once you are positioned correctly, what is meant for you does not have to be chased in the same way. It begins to meet you where you are. And when life begins to meet you where you are, it brings a different kind of test, one that is quieter, but just as important as everything you have already gone through. It is no longer about surviving what you faced before. It becomes about what you are willing to release in order to move forward fully. Because positioning is not just about what you gain, it is also about what you leave behind. Chosen one. There are things in your life right now that cannot follow you into the next level you are stepping into. Not because they are entirely wrong, but because they no longer fit who you are becoming. This is where the process becomes more personal, because it is no longer about external circumstances forcing change. It is about internal awareness guiding your decisions. You may feel this in subtle ways: a growing discomfort with certain conversations, a quiet resistance to environments that once felt normal, A sense that some connections, even long-standing ones, are no longer aligned with where you are headed. This does not always come with clear explanations, and that can make it difficult. You may find yourself questioning whether you are being too distant or too selective. But this is where you have to trust what you have already learned. Not every connection is meant to continue. Some were part of your development, not your destination. And holding on to what no longer aligns can slow down what is trying to unfold in your life. I remember a period where I had to step back from certain relationships that I had been part of for years. There was nothing dramatic that happened, no clear conflict, just a growing awareness that I was no longer the same person in those spaces. At first it felt uncomfortable, almost like I was abandoning something familiar, but over time I realized I was not losing anything. I was making room for what was actually meant to align with me. Chosen one. This is where your discernment becomes protection. You are not closing yourself off. You are becoming more intentional about what you allow into your space. You are recognizing that your energy is not something to be given freely without awareness. It is something to be managed, protected, and directed. This is also where boundaries become necessary, not as a reaction, but as a standard. You begin to understand that saying no is not rejection, it is clarity. It is choosing alignment over obligation. And that shift can feel unfamiliar if you have spent a long time prioritizing others over yourself. There may be moments where you feel guilt, especially if you are used to being the one who holds things together, who listens, who supports. But you have to recognize that constantly giving without balance leads to depletion, and depletion makes it difficult to move forward with clarity. You are learning to give without losing yourself. That is a different kind of strength. At the same time, there is another layer to this process that often goes unnoticed. As you begin to release what no longer fits, you may also notice that certain opportunities or directions that once seemed important begin to fade in significance. Goals that once drove you may no longer feel as urgent. Paths you once considered essential may now feel optional. This is not a loss of direction. It is refinement. You are no longer chasing what you thought you needed. You are recognizing what actually aligns with you now. And that shift allows you to focus your energy more effectively. Instead of spreading yourself across multiple directions, you begin to concentrate on what truly matters. This is where your decisions start to carry more weight, not because they are harder, but because they are more intentional. You are no longer reacting to circumstances. You are responding from awareness. Chosen one. This is where alignment begins to create momentum. It may not feel dramatic at first. In fact, it can feel almost quiet. But there is a difference in how things start to move. You may notice that when you commit to something that feels right, it flows more naturally, not without effort, but without unnecessary resistance. There is a sense of ease in the process, even when it requires discipline. This is different from forcing something to work. You have experienced what it feels like to push against resistance repeatedly to try to make something fit when it clearly does not. This is not that. This is a more balanced movement where your actions and your direction begin to align. And with that alignment comes a different kind of confidence, not the kind that needs to be proven, but the kind that is felt internally. You trust your decisions more, you second-guess yourself less. You are still aware, still thoughtful, but you are not constantly questioning your own judgment. That shift changes how you move through challenges as well. When obstacles appear, you no longer immediately assume you are on the wrong path. You assess, you adjust, but you continue. You understand that difficulty is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes it is simply part of the process of building something that is meant to last. Chosen one. This is where your perspective on struggle changes. You no longer see it as something that is happening to you. You begin to see it as something that is shaping you, and that shift allows you to move through it with a different mindset. There is also a growing sense of stability that develops here. Even if your external circumstances are still changing internally, you feel more grounded. You are not as easily influenced by what is happening around you. You are able to stay focused to maintain your direction even when things are not perfectly clear. This stability is not something that appears suddenly. It is something that has been building through every experience you have had. Every challenge, every moment of reflection, every decision you made when you were uncertain, all of it contributed to this. And now you are beginning to feel the result of that process. Chosen one. You are not in the same place you were before. Even if your environment has not fully caught up to your internal shift, it will, because what has changed within you will eventually shape what surrounds you. And this is where something important begins to happen. You stop trying to control every outcome. You focus on maintaining alignment and you allow the results to follow. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become precise. You direct your energy where it matters and you let go of what does not. You act when it is necessary and you step back when it is not. That balance is what allows things to come together in a way that feels natural instead of forced. And as you continue in this direction, there is one more shift that is preparing to take place. It is not about what you are leaving behind anymore. It is about what you are ready to fully step into. What you are stepping into now requires a different version of you, not a completely new person, but a more complete expression of who you have already been becoming. This is where everything you have experienced begins to converge. The awareness you developed, the boundaries you learned, the clarity you gained, all of it starts to work together in a way that feels more stable and intentional. Chosen one. This is not about suddenly arriving at a perfect place where everything is clear and easy. It is about reaching a point where you trust yourself enough to move forward without needing everything to be certain. There is a quiet confidence that begins to settle in, one that does not need to be announced or proven. It is simply there, guiding how you think, how you respond, and how you choose. You may notice that your focus becomes sharper. Distractions that once pulled your attention no longer have the same effect. You are able to stay with what matters for longer periods of time. You are less reactive to things that are not aligned with your direction. This is not because life has stopped presenting challenges, but because your relationship with those challenges has changed. There is also a deeper sense of responsibility that comes with this stage. You begin to recognize that what you do next matters not just for you, but for the direction your life is taking as a whole. You are no longer moving without awareness. Each decision, each step carries weight, because you understand how it contributes to your path. I remember reaching a point where I realized that the way I used my time and energy was directly shaping my future in ways I could not ignore anymore. It was not a dramatic realization, but it was clear. I could see how small decisions added up over time. That awareness made me more intentional, not out of pressure, but out of understanding. Chosen one. This is where intention becomes your foundation. You are no longer reacting to what happens around you. You are choosing how to engage with it. You are deciding where your attention goes, what you invest your energy into, and what you allow to influence you. That level of awareness gives you a different kind of control, one that is not about forcing outcomes, but about directing your own movement. This is also where your sense of identity becomes more stable. You are not shifting based on who you are around. You are consistent in how you show up, regardless of the environment. This does not mean you are rigid. It means you are grounded. You can adapt without losing your sense of self. There will still be moments where you feel uncertain. That does not disappear completely. But the difference now is that uncertainty does not stop you. It becomes something you move through rather than something that holds you back. You have enough clarity to continue even when everything is not fully defined. And as you continue, you may start to notice that things begin to align in ways that feel natural. Opportunities appear that match your direction. Conversations happen that provide insight or connection. Situations unfold that support the path you are on. These moments are not random. They are a reflection of the alignment you have been building internally. Chosen. 1. This is where your external life begins to reflect your internal state more clearly. The more aligned you are within yourself, the more your environment begins to mirror that alignment. This does not mean everything becomes perfect, but it does mean that what enters your life is more consistent with who you are now. You may also find that your impact on others becomes more noticeable, not because you are trying to influence anyone, but because the way you carry yourself has changed. People may respond to you differently. They may listen more closely. They may trust your perspective more. This is not something you need to control. It is a natural result of being grounded in yourself. At the same time, it is important to stay aware of what brought you here. The growth you experienced did not happen by accident. It came from reflection, from adjustment, from choosing to continue even when things were unclear. Maintaining that awareness is what allows you to keep moving forward without losing what you have built. There is also a sense of completion that begins to form, not in the sense that your journey is finished, but in the sense that a certain phase of your life is closing. The confusion, the constant questioning, the feeling of being out of place, those things begin to lose their hold on you. They no longer define how you see yourself. You are no longer trying to figure out who you are. You are living it. And that shift changes everything. Chosen 1. This is where your presence becomes your strength. You do not need to explain yourself as much. You do not need to convince others of your value. You simply move in alignment with who you are, and that consistency speaks for itself. There will still be growth ahead. There will still be adjustments, new experiences and new challenges. But you are not approaching them from the same place you once did. You are approaching them with awareness, with intention, and with a level of stability that has been built over time. And as you continue, you begin to realize something that may have been difficult to see before. You were never behind, you were developing. Everything that felt delayed, everything that felt unclear, everything that seemed out of place, it was all part of a process that brought you to this point. And now you are no longer waiting for something to begin. You are already in motion. The direction is not something you are searching for anymore. It is something you are walking in. Chosen 1. You are still here, and that alone carries more meaning than you have allowed yourself to see. After everything that tried to silence you, everything that tried to confuse you, everything that tried to make you forget who you are still standing, still aware, still moving forward. That is not chance. That is confirmation. There is a mark on your life that cannot be erased, a covering that has followed you since the beginning. What tried to break you could not finish the assignment because your life was never left unguarded. Even in moments where you felt alone, you were being preserved. Anointed 1. This is your Kairos moment, not something far away, not something you are waiting for. It is now. The shift has already begun within you, and what is forming internally will soon reflect in everything around you. Walk forward with clarity. Stay aligned with what you have come to understand. Protect what you carry. You are not stepping into something unfamiliar. You are stepping into what has always belonged to you. If this word has settled in your spirit, you can confirm it in a simple way. Write, "I receive" in the comments as a quiet agreement with what is unfolding. And if you feel led, stay connected here so you do not miss what is meant to guide you next. Chosen one, move forward with peace, with awareness, and with the certainty that you are exactly where you need to be.